question that comes up when we talk about immigration, so when we're trying to talk compassionately about immigration, is why do people migrate? Why? There seems to be this prevailing notion with our president, with half the Americans in the country, that people migrate because they're criminals, right? Why are they coming here? They're criminals. I mean, most people accept that. Like, there's this huge criminal motivation. I want to do this because I like breaking the law. I want to do this because I have no respect for the law. I'm a born criminal. It's absurd. Why do people migrate? I ask this question of kids all the time, and they always get it because kids are awesome. 3 big reasons. What's the first one? Someone shout.
Desperate.
Right, they're desperate. When I talk about desperation, we talk about our physical bodies. They migrate because they can't keep their bodies safe. There's bombs dropping. There's no food. There's someone with a gun to their head. Stuff like that. They can't live there. They can't do it anymore. They have to move because there's no other choice. What's the second one?
Jobs.
Jobs, money, economics. That can be a lot of things. That can be moving because you've got a job, you have better job opportunities. It's moving because your kids have better opportunities to get educated and have a better life. I have a friend who works in Cuauhtemoc, and she's pretty awesome, and she works at an Allsups down there. It's not called Allsups, but it's the equivalent, like a Pemex station or something. And we were talking, she was visiting, and she was like, yeah, I'm earning $40. And I was like, a day? That's not nearly enough. And she's like, a week. At the same job in Mexico, at least in the last, in the zone A of Mexico, which is our borderlands, because I have to write briefs about Mexico, you're earning about 10% of what a worker would earn in the same job here in the United States. And then people are like, oh yeah, but Mexico's cheap. People ride around on donkeys and eat corn. And no, it's a modern country. Diapers, milk, gas, cars. All of this stuff doesn't cost 10% of what it costs in the United States, right? So this idea that someone who could come up across the border had a way to do that and earn so much more and be able to send that back to their family to support, that's a criminal act, that person probably has never known what it felt like not to be able to feed your family, not to be able to feed your babies, not to be able to buy clothes for your kids, and stuff like that. So we have keeping yourself alive, keeping your economic reasons. What's the third big reason I ask kids why people migrate? Fear. I'd say that's closer to keeping your body alive. Yeah.
Violence.
Well, I'd say that's closer to keeping your life. Who said family? Yeah. This is one that everyone mostly overlooks. It's usually the last thing that people say, and it's also the most powerful one. Your family is in 2 different countries, and you need to move to be together because you love each other, and because family, when you're not in your home, can be a home to you. And we want to be with our families. If my family moved to another country, I would try and get to them. And I think all of us can think about our families in that way. And it's a huge love is a huge motivating force of migration. And it certainly isn't criminally motivated, right? One of the saddest things I work when I have clients is when they can't go home when their parents are dying. It is the saddest. I got to hold my mother's hand while she died. And the thought that because of our borders, you can't go home and be with the person who brought you life, it's incredibly devastating. This is not criminal stuff. This is stuff that's made out of love. And so I really ask people when they're talking about why don't they just do it legally? Why can't they wait 25 years in line? Why don't they just get an education and get that work visa? To really consider the crossroads that people find themselves in, whether it's because of money, whether it's because of violence, whether it's because of family, whether it's because of drought. We talk about violence as something that forces people to move. What about when our global south can't produce food anymore because of global warming? Gosh, you can live a while when bombs are dropping. How long can you live when there's no longer water where you live? 0 days. You'd move that next day. So having a compassionate understanding of immigration more and more is going to require understanding what legal means and how legal is a structure that we've created with all these fake numbers and quotas and categories. And reality is that that system has stopped responding to the push factors of global migration and the pull factors of bringing people who need jobs and want to be with their family. Which is a perfect segue, and I promise I'm going to stop talking soon and get to your questions, into asylum law. And what is really, really, really happening on our border right now is that economic migration, as important as it is, we've kind of shut that down because you can't get across our border. Some people can get tourist visas, some people can still get their visas and overstay, but it's becoming harder and harder to come into the United States in a non-dangerous way. And believe it or not, most immigrants are really uncomfortable doing things illegally. Despite what everyone says, a lot of people are like, I could never cross the border. It's dangerous. It's illegal. I can't do that to my kids. So economic migration is being stifled because it's just too difficult to get across the border right now. And family reunification, that reason for migration, it's really dangerous. All this risky stuff that's happening, family separation, indefinite prison, as much as we want to be with our families, we don't put ourselves through that kind of stuff just to see our mom again, or just to see our nieces and nephews. The reason people are rushing the border right now, in spite of all the reasons, the dangerous and the inhumane and the violent reasons that our country has given people to not do it, is because the thing that they're running from is way worse than anything our country has to offer. And I know that because I've seen it, and I know that because I've been on the migrant trails, and I know that because I'm a person. And I know that no one would ever come to a border and put their kids into the custody of strangers and put themselves into federal prison, not knowing if they're ever going to see them again, if they didn't have a damn good reason to do it. And if you think that someone who's from Honduras, a mother from Honduras, somehow loves and grieves in a different way than you do, that would make that possible to do for a better paycheck, then you have a really serious misunderstanding of human beings. Central American mothers and fathers love and grieve the exact same way that we all do. The things that are happening to them, they are feeling the exact same way that you would feel if you put themselves in their shoes. So the thing that they must be running from has to be horrible. I have seen women throw babies onto the top of freight trains. Any woman or man in this room who's ever had a baby, what would cause you to do that? Right? What would cause you to throw an infant child on top of a freight train into a stranger's hands? That's what they're running from. It's not fiction. There is incredibly violent collapse happening in Central America right now with cartels, with maras, with transnational gangs. And the states are collapsing because they can no longer, the security forces can't keep citizens safe anymore. And when securities can't keep people safe, then violence, like domestic violence and sexual violence, becomes rampant too because there's no enforcing it. These people are flooding at our border to ask for political asylum. Now, the Western Hemisphere is not like Africa, or the Middle East, or Europe. There are no, refugee camps where there's UN workers in vests and camps where you can go and say, my life's in danger in my country. We don't have that. From Brazil to Alaska, we don't have a single place, a neutral place in a third-party country where you can go and say, I'm in danger, I need to become a refugee, and you need to send me to another country. The only thing you can do in the Americas is put your feet in another country and say, I want political asylum. You can only do it if you're present, whether you're across the river or the invisible border, or whether you're at the port of entry, literally knocking on the door. Now, what happens is you come political asylum. It doesn't matter if you're arrested north of the border or if you're at the port of entry. And then they immediately detain you. And they might detain you with their kid. They might take your kid from you. You might be alone. They detain you. And then you do this interview called the credible fear interview. It's a threshold interview to pull you out of a rapid deportation process and to evaluate whether or not your fear of returning to your home country is credible. Usually they're about 2-hour interviews with trained asylum officers. And if you pass that interview, you're pulled out of rapid deportation and you're given an opportunity to go in front of a judge and ask for political asylum. If you don't pass the interview, you're removed. Expedited removal. But when people pass it, in the past, what they would do is they would let you go. They might let you go on a bond. They might give you like an ankle bracelet. And then you'd go to, say, Santa Fe, and eventually you would get a notice to appear in immigration court. Our court's El Paso in Santa Fe. And you get a notice to appear, and then you would show up, and you'd have your asylum case evaluated. You'd probably have like 3 or 4 hearings spread out over 6 months. It's like normal court. It doesn't all happen at once. You go, your lawyer and the judge talks for 10 minutes, and then you schedule another one. Your lawyer and your judge talks for 10 minutes. You have no idea what's happening. And then eventually you get to the big hearing, and you do your asylum hearing. But what happened was Trump and Sessions decided to say, no more catch and release. And so what they're doing is they're detaining all asylum seekers in our borderlands right now without release. And that includes children, includes pregnant women, includes the population of people I work with, transgender women. And they're holding them indefinitely in all these borderland prisons. So they have to do their asylum cases while they're detained. And they place these prisons in places where there are no lawyers, where they have no resources to work their asylum cases. And they're there for a very, very, very long time. We have the resources to deport about 400,000 people a year in this country. We have backlogs. Like I did a hearing today with someone who we had this like weird thing with this weird snafu, and I said like we're not ready to proceed, and the judge said fine. I'm gonna set your next hearing out a year from now, because she did not have any time in the next year to get this guy on her schedule. These courts are like incredibly backlogged, and we're holding people in the backlog in prison rather than letting them go. So that's what's going on in our borderlands right now. And that is not necessary. It's not the tradition of the United States. Obama started that in 2014 as an attempt to deter asylum seekers. They were like, look, we're getting really good at stopping undocumented immigration. They're like, yeah, we just close the borders, we make life really hard, we're going to do a lot of deportation of all the undocumented immigrants who are in the country already. But how do we stop people who are seeking political asylum under legal international authority? Right? How do you do that? You can't really do it. They have a legal right to ask for political asylum. They haven't broken a single law when they do it. Well, you can't stop it because we have all these like protocols and conventions with the UN. But what you can do is make it so dark and so filled with suffering and so psychologically damaging that people give up and go home or they don't try at all. And that's what you're seeing play out on our southern border right now. They're starting to persecute the one class of people who they can't legally kick out of the country, we are required by international law to give a fair hearing in immigration court. And that's what's happening. Is all of this maneuvering is to make it as difficult and traumatic and devastating as possible for people who are fleeing the most horrific violence in the world to come here and ask us for help. That's it. And political asylum is not easy, y'all. It's not just that your life is in danger. It's not just that you were almost killed. You have to show nexus between the danger that you're fleeing and your identity in the society, whether it's your political opinion, your religion, your nationality, your race, or your membership in a particular social group. I have a fairly easy time with transgender cases because it's a visible and particular social group, and these women experience violence because they're transgender. That's a classic political asylum case. However, women, in general, women are not a specific enough class of people. So when the violence is happening because you're from a country where they treat women like animals, and when there's no respect for female life, that's not a political asylum case. We don't grant asylum to women because the violence is because they're women. That's just not a thing. We don't give asylum to little boys who are being recruited to gangs simply because they're 13 years old and in El Salvador. Little boy being recruited by a gang isn't a visible enough social group in that country to grant someone political asylum. Most of these asylum cases that are coming will fail, but they need to be given the chance to have a good lawyer like us, like our organization, and be in front of a good judge who's going to fairly evaluate whether or not they're going to be killed when they get home. So that's political asylum. I'm just going to touch on one other thing I forgot and I wanted to talk about, which is I.C.E and deportation and sanctuary. So we have ICE all over Santa Fe right now. We're picking up people and arresting them and sending them to El Paso and trying to deport them. And people always say, like, but we're a sanctuary city. Like, every time someone's like neighbor gets arrested, they call and they say, do your job, we're a sanctuary city. Why is this happening? Well, sanctuary city doesn't mean ICE isn't allowed to come in the city, not even at all. Sanctuary city means that our city isn't going to use any of our resources to cooperate with federal law enforcement. So it doesn't mean they can't come in. It just means our police isn't going to call them, our mayor's not going to call them. We're not going to use any of our city facilities to help. We're just not going to cooperate at all. But they can still be here, and they're here every day executing warrants, and in the process of executing warrants, violating people's civil rights about as atrociously as you can imagine. They're lying to people. I've had more than one client who got arrested because the ICE officer said, I'm Santa Fe police. And they got out of the vehicle and they were arrested. Or they said, yeah, I'm from El Salvador, and they were arrested. They're doing this in front of kids. We had it happen in front of a school in May. They're here. So what happens when someone is arrested? Sometimes people call me and they say, oh my gosh, my neighbor was deported this morning. I'm like, okay, they weren't deported. They were arrested. Because there's a huge amount of things that have to happen between arrest and deportation. The first thing that's going to happen if they're in Santa Fe is they're going to get picked up, they're going to get taken to Albuquerque, where they're going to be processed, and they're going to wait for like a 3 p.m. transfer to El Paso. And then everyone that they picked up that day who's waiting in Albuquerque, they're going to put on a bus and take them to El Paso. Now, why wouldn't they take them to Cibola County where I work? It's 150 miles from Santa Fe. It'd be so much easier if they put people in Cibola County. Oh no, they take them to El Paso, just making it much harder to find a lawyer, to have your loved ones connect with you. It's 5 hours away, and you have to go through a checkpoint to get there. So an undocumented family can't go down there and deal with it because they can't get through the checkpoints. So you get picked up and you go to El Paso. At that point, if you're eligible for a bond, your family might be able to hire a lawyer and help you get a bond. That's if you're eligible. But the problem is in El Paso right now, as in a lot of other courts, the bonds are really, really high. Again, this might be someone who's never committed a crime. Their only crime might be that they're overstayed a visa or they're in the country undocumented. Yet we're seeing like $25,000 bonds from the judge. And immigration bonds are not like criminal bonds. You don't pay 10%, you pay 100%. Right? It's really bad. And so if you can get a bond, if you can get one at all from the judge, and you can afford to pay it, then they'll come back to you, probably with an ankle monitor, and then eventually they'll get called back to El Paso to fight their court. It might be like a week from then. It might actually be like 5 years from then. It varies a lot. I've had some people who get notices to appear 5 years in the future, and some people who like a week later they're like get to court. I don't know how they decide. But if you can't get out, then you have to fight your case while detained, and that can take a very, very, very long time. And you're in really, really horrible conditions. We gave a talk last night about how our only immigration prisons in our state are with private correctional corporations. And I almost am reluctant to even start talking about them because I could just like start melting and screaming. We work in a private correctional facility in Cibola County CoreCivic is the owner, and they house asylum-seeking men and transgender women. And it is one of the most horrible places I've ever been. And they do things that I'm not going to start talking about because I'm going to start crying. But they do things to human beings that we have to witness in the walls of that prison that are unspeakable. It's like witnessing state-sanctioned violence. And it's especially difficult to endure when you're watching it happen to a transgender woman. And so that is the landscape of detention and deportation in New Mexico right now. We have ICE is in full operation here in this state and here in this city. And people do have certain rights when ICE comes knocking, when ICE pulls you over. There are rights. And it's so funny, like we have kids practice their rights and they say, I don't have to show you my ID. Like, do you have a warrant? And we practice asserting rights, and it's always in this like congenial environment where the ICE officer's like, muy bien, I don't have a warrant. Well, goodbye now. And everyone claps. But the reality is, these are fast-moving situations, and these officers are more than happy to violate your civil rights. And it's actually a very, very, very difficult situation to survive, because our rights presume that the person who is coming after us respect those rights. And I think we know enough about cop behavior in this country and law enforcement behavior to know that if the person with the gun and the person with the badge doesn't want to respect your rights, you saying warrant, warrant, warrant doesn't matter at all. And so that's what we're seeing on the streets of Santa Fe. I also urge you to think of that and expand your imagination of what family separation is. When you think of families being deported, families being split up, families being sent to El Paso, that's family separation too. Obama was a great family separator. He deported 2 million people throughout his entire presidency. All those people had families, right? And so please, I love how excited everyone is about family separation, but please expand your imagination to understand that family separation can take many, many, many forms. And it's not something new, and it's not something we're going to see an end to when the last kid is reunited with their family, hopefully later this month, if things keep going like they're going. So anyway, that's my basic speech on immigration.